of 100 Days with Jesus. And we've basically been walking through the story of Jesus by taking a chapter each day from the Gospels, as we've been going through these 100 days plus total. Like I said, today's day 33, and today is the first day that we're really beginning to start focusing on that last week that Jesus spent with his disciples as he's going into Jerusalem and spending time in Jerusalem. And then later on in that week, he is crucified on what we call Good Friday. And then 3 days later, there's Resurrection Sunday. Now, tonight, we are focusing on John 11, which is it tells of events that happen right before it, but it kind of gives us a lot of the background and it gives us a lot of what led up to the rest of what we're about to get into. It's like an introductory chapter to last that last week that Jesus spent with the disciples before rising from the dead. So, John 11, it is one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible. It's powerful. It's one of the most powerful things ever has been. It's not as powerful as the story of the resurrection of Jesus himself, but this is a precursor to that. So in John 11, Jesus' friend Lazarus, he was sick. He was from Bethany, and the village, which is a village of Mary and her sister Martha, which they're also sisters of Lazarus. Mary was also Lazarus' sister, was also the one who anointed Jesus before his burial. And we'll get into that tomorrow. Fact is, looking forward to that too. So Mary, she's the one that anointed him. But let's get into the story here about Lazarus. So he was sick, and Jesus gets word of it. He gets a message. Says, "Lord, the one you love is sick." Speaking of Lazarus, and when Jesus heard it, he said, the sickness will not end." He said, "The sickness will not end in death, but it is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it." And Jesus stayed there where he was for a few days. He stayed there 2 more days, that is. Um, and then after that, he said to his disciples, "Let's go. Let's go to Judea again." And here's the backdrop to that. The backdrop to that is that multiple times the Jewish leadership were ready to stone Jesus. They were ready to arrest Jesus, ready to have Jesus killed already. And I knew there was a lot of hostility back in Jerusalem or back in the area of Jerusalem if Jesus just went back there. And so Jesus is saying, let's go to Judea again, which is the area around Jerusalem. And so the disciples say, "Rabbi, just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again?" In fact, as they tried multiple times. And Jesus said, "Aren't there 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of the world. If anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him." He said this and then told them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up." And you and I and them, we would all say just what they said. "Well, if he's asleep, isn't he going to wake up? Why do you need to go wake him up? He'll wake up on his own." And Jesus is like, "Look, let me spell it out for you plainly. He's dead. He's passed away, but I'm gonna go wake him up." So, um, and he said, "I'm glad for you that I wasn't there so that you may believe. Let's go to him." And then Thomas, the one later on known as Doubting Thomas. You've probably heard that before, the idea of a doubting Thomas. He's just being a doubting Thomas. Well, then Thomas, called the 20, said to his fellow disciples, "Let's go there with Jesus so that we may die with him." He didn't sound very doubtful then. He said doubtful that they would live, but still had enough faith in Jesus. He's willing to die for him and die with him. Um, and so when Jesus arrives, he finds that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days. Um, he made his way to Bethany. Many of the Jews had come there. And I won't get into all my thoughts of why there were so many Jews there, but all the Jews had come there, because it requires a little bit more time than what I want to take here. But many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them, to surround them, to be support to them as they've just lost their brother Lazarus. So they're all there. They're all gathered together in the house. And then Martha, she comes to Jesus and says, Lord, if you'd have just been here, he wouldn't have died. I'm saying a little southern like, but Lord, if you'd have just been here, he would not have died. Yet even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And Jesus says to her, your brother will rise again, Jesus told her. And Martha said, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection. And then Jesus says one of the most awesome and one of the most powerful things about himself. So Martha's just saying, well, yeah, I know he'll rise again in the resurrection. And Jesus says, I am the resurrection. I am the life. He who believes in me will live though he dies. He who dies will live even though he dies. Um, I may not have said that quite exactly the way it said. As a matter of fact, everyone who lives and believes in me will never die, ever. Do you believe this? They may die physically, but they will never die spiritually. They will be alive forever and ever. Those who place their faith and trust in who Jesus really truly is. And she says, yes, Lord, I do believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who comes into the world. And one that the Jews had heard about for many years, the Israelites, the people of Israel, had heard of for many, many years would be coming. She believed that this is the one who was to have come, and that he has come, and that he was him in and of himself, indeed. And so Martha goes and tells Mary, Lazarus' other sister. And Mary's in the house, and she's surrounded by all these Jews. And when Mary hears word that Jesus is there, she runs out of the house and she falls before Jesus, and she's just weeping and weeping and weeping. And she's saying the same thing to Jesus. Maybe they had been saying this back and forth to each other. She said the same thing to Jesus. If you'd have just been here, he wouldn't have died. And then Jesus himself weeps. Some of the most precious two words in all the Bible. Jesus wept. I know when I was a kid and a lot of other friends that I was friends with, and it's like, we memorized a Bible verse, and that may not have been your background, but that was my background, the background of a lot of people. We had these challenges to memorize. I can memorize the Bible verses. It's John 11:35. Jesus wept. It was a lot more than just what's known as the shortest verse in the Bible. It's one of the most powerful two words in the whole Bible. The fact that he wept. And it struck the Jews that had run out there with Mary. She's running out of the house, and they're wondering what in the world she's doing. And they're going to look after her and going to find out where she's running off to. And they get out there and find that she's falling before Jesus, weeping before Jesus. And then they see Jesus himself weep as well. And they said how much he cared for him. But then they were griping too and saying, well, if he really cared about him, I mean, couldn't he really? And there's others that were saying this amongst them. It's like, if he really cared about him, and he healed the blind, why couldn't he kept him from dying? And then Jesus asked, where is he? And then Martha says, well, Jesus, he's been dead for 4 days. He's got to stink like crazy. And just like, let me go see him. Let me go where he is. And he gets to the tomb where Lazarus is buried. And he shouts with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. Yeah, they had rolled away the stone. I mean, he'd already asked for that. That's when Mary and Martha said something about the stink of it, the smell of it. Of, and they had already rolled away the stone. And he called forth Lazarus to come out. And he's walking out with all his grave clothes. He's covered in his grave clothes. And Jesus is like, take off the grave clothes. And he is, this is alive, as alive as alive can be, and free as free can be, especially when gets all the grave clothes off of him. And before he did this, by the way, he prayed this prayer. He said, I thank you, Father, that this hour has come and that these are able to see this. And he explained he prayed that prayer for those who are listening so that they would know that this was a thing that was not of man, it was a thing that was absolutely, totally of God. And when people see this happen, they there's just not much guesswork left to whether he really was or is the Messiah at this point. So many people of Jewish ranks, of Jewish leadership ranks, they're going and starting to follow Jesus at this point. And it threw the Jewish leadership into a frenzy. They were already in frenzies, but this threw them into a major frenzy because so many other Jews were beginning to follow Jesus now that this has happened. And so many of their own leadership, if not openly, or at least privately, had already decided that they're following Jesus at this point. So they're coming up with all kinds of plots at this moment, all the more to kill Jesus. And at whatever point to even kill Lazarus, which was proof of Jesus being who Jesus really was by his resurrection from the dead, the way he was risen from the dead, the way he was. And so, because of this increased hostility, Jesus takes his disciples and they go off toward the wilderness to a place called Ephraim, and he stays with his disciples there. And here's the reality: past few ever chapters that we've been covering, it does cover a lot of the gap between where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead and then when he goes into Jerusalem. So tomorrow we will pick up how just days later Jesus is anointed by Mary, but then Jesus also goes into Jerusalem in John chapter 12. Oh, we're going to pick up John chapter 12 tomorrow. And we will start following Jesus as he literally journeys literally into Jerusalem. Here was a backdrop for that. Here is an introductory for that. I just got to say to you, if you got Jesus, act like you love Jesus. Act like you got Jesus. Act like you are alive for Jesus. You're on fire for Jesus. You got the joy of Jesus. Jesus is the resurrection. He is the life. And whatever resurrection thing that you need to happen in your life, whatever life thing you need to happen in your life, he's got it. He can deliver. He's got the goods. He can deliver the goods. Be on fire for Jesus like never before because there's a world around us that needs to see Jesus in you, needs to see Jesus in me, and Jesus in in the life of every follower of Jesus out there because I really totally believe we're in the last days, especially with all the stuff going on right now. Totally believe it. And I think it's an opportunity right now for those of us that love Jesus, who have Jesus in our lives, for us to be leading that many more people to Jesus before the days advance even all the more in these last days. I'd like to get into some of the details of that, but not at the moment. But my big thing too is if you've never given your life to Jesus, there is no better friend. He really does care, even to the point of weeping. Not just for Lazarus, not just for Mary, not just for Martha, not just for his 12 disciples, but for you too. He really does care about you. That's the whole reason why he came. It's because he cares. And he's coming back again. Are you ready for that? I'm saying that to the believers out there too. Are you ready for Jesus to come back again? Here's a sure sign to know whether you're living in fellowship with God. You're excited about Jesus coming back. You're ready for him to come back. But the crazy thing is, for those of us who follow Jesus and we get out of fellowship with Jesus, like we're not being in fellowship with Jesus like we're supposed to be, we don't look forward to it. And if you're a believer out there and you're not looking forward to Jesus' coming, you need to check something out. Either you never really became a believer, or there's something not going on right in your life. But if you're not a believer, you never trusted Jesus, it's the best decision you'll ever make in your whole entire life. All right, be blessed.